You might have missed these shocking historical photos. Write your opinion in the comments. This is firefighter Mike Kehoe going up Tower 1 on September 11, 2001, while others were moving down. He later made it out alive, making this a rare photo of someone who went upward and came back. That tiny white dot is a Japanese plane falling beside the United States Navy carrier Cabot on June 19, 1944. In that battle, Japan lost hundreds of aircraft, and its carrier air power never truly recovered. United States Marines destroy captured rifles in Iraq in 2003, turning a whole weapons pile into scrap. The photo shows how fast military bases and local stockpiles changed hands during the first weeks of the campaign. In 1982, Iranian footballer Habib Kabiri stood with empty hands while teammates held Khomeini portraits. That quiet refusal became famous because he was later punished for his politics, turning one missing portrait into the whole story. In 1971, a Stanford study put students into fake guard and prisoner roles inside a basement hallway like this. It ended after only 6 days because ordinary students began acting with alarming control, making it one of psychology's most debated experiments. In 1946, workers searched the broken King David Hotel in Jerusalem after an underground group struck the British offices inside it. The shocking part is that this luxury hotel had quietly doubled as a center of government power. After tense Beijing talks over Hong Kong, the British Prime Minister stumbled outside the Great Hall of the People on September 24, 1982. The image became famous because one small fall seemed to show Britain losing control of Hong Kong's future. In Japan in 1940, small Tonarigumi neighborhood groups were ordered to dig shelters, share food, and watch for fires. This photo shows ordinary families turning into a wartime civil defense network under their own streets. In 1992, Transnistrian separatists used an armored vehicle as cover during the short war that split Moldova. The strange part is that this small strip of land still acts like a separate state today, even though most of the world does not recognize it. Priscilla and Emmett Bajano turned rare medical conditions into a famous sideshow career after meeting as performers. They stayed married for almost 60 years, appeared in films and documentaries, and later toured with their son Tony. On April 9, 1989, Soviet troops broke up a huge pro-independence protest outside this government building in Tbilisi. 21 people lost their lives, and the shock helped push Georgia even faster toward independence. Bertold Beitz was a German businessman who used factory papers to mark Jewish workers as essential in 1942. By the end of the war, his quiet actions had helped save more than 800 people. On February 23, 1944, Chechen and Ingush families were forced from the Caucasus onto trains bound for Central Asia. Whole villages vanished in one day, and many people never made it back home. On June 19, 1944, a Canadian medic treated a French boy near Villons-le-Buisson during the Battle of Normandy. His little brother watches closely, showing how quickly the front line had reached ordinary village life. British Sherman tanks roll past a Royal Canadian Air Force Spitfire that came down near Tilly-sur-Seulles on June 17, 1944. One photo shows the whole Normandy push at once, aircraft in the grass and armor still moving forward. At a Rome hospital in 1943, 3 doctors created Syndrome K, a fake disease name that sounded official enough to scare German inspectors. People hidden under that label were told to cough like they had a dangerous infection, and all of them survived. At 17 years and 2 months old, Toshio Ihana was the youngest Japanese Army special attack pilot recorded among the Okinawa units in 1945. After his final flight, he was raised 4 ranks, showing how a teenage face was turned into a wartime symbol. In 1985, Kosovo farmer George Martinovic became the center of a deeply disputed case that spread across Yugoslav media. One unclear injury turned into a national political symbol, helping fuel the fear and anger that later tore the country apart. Louis Hine photographed children like this young mill worker in the early 1900s to prove what factories tried to hide. His pictures helped turn child labor from an ignored problem into evidence that changed United States law. In January 1887, French colonial forces photographed captured Vietnamese villagers after the siege of Ba Dinh in northern Vietnam. The postcard called them pirates, but the image actually shows how colonial labels turned local resistance into a crime. In 1945, a Japanese rear admiral signed surrender papers while wearing a British Distinguished Service Cross. The medal came from an earlier age when Britain and Japan were allies, making this table a strange meeting of past friendship and final defeat. This dauntless dive bomber landed on United States ship Yorktown after helping strike the Japanese carrier Kaga at Midway on June 4, 1942. Low on fuel and already damaged, the plane survived that mission, but later went down with Yorktown itself. This is the Capacci Highway in Sicily after the Mafia attack on Judge Giovanni Falcone on May 23, 1992. Falcone had helped expose Cosa Nostra, and this scene pushed Italy into a much harder fight against organized crime. In April 1910, the United States battleship Indiana tested giant side brakes that swung out from the hull like metal wings. They helped slow the ship, but also reduce speed and were too hard to maintain, so the Navy abandoned the idea. This American circus performer worked for nearly 70 years, often using a carefully made stage character created by show owners. Behind the strange costume stories, he was a top-billed professional who loved his formal suit and knew how to hold a crowd. At Orgreave on June 18, 1984, Leslie Bolton had come to document the miners' strike when a mounted officer raised his baton toward her. The image became famous because many officers had covered or removed their collar numbers, leaving one of the strike's most known faces unidentified. In the Western Desert on September 29, 1942, a British soldier pauses by the grave of a German tank crewman beside his knocked-out Panzer III. The scene is striking because the machine is ruined, but the small cross makes the desert feel suddenly personal. On the set of The Misfits in 1961, the actor and the writer stood together while their marriage was already falling apart. The film became even heavier in history because it was her last completed movie, and their divorce came soon after. On October 27, 1962, Vasily Arkhipov refused the order that needed his signature aboard Soviet submarine B-59 near Cuba. One missing signature may have kept the Cuban Missile Crisis from turning into a global catastrophe. In 1946, Neponset beachgoers could be stopped for leaving the sand in swimwear instead of a robe. The sign looks almost unreal today, but it shows how strictly public clothing was controlled in middle 20th century America. At Soesterberg Air Base in 1959, a United States Air Force Super Sabre was shown with a mechanic playfully half inside its air intake. The joke worked because this jet could fly faster than sound, yet here it looked like a hungry machine being fed by hand. At Cape Wam Airstrip in 1945, Japanese General Hatazo Adachi handed his sword to Australian Major General Robertson after the New Guinea campaign. The sword was not just metal, it was the public sign that an army cut off in the jungle had finally surrendered. On a gray London day in 1960, an Italian film star posed beside a jellied eel stall while filming The Millionairess on the South Bank. The funny contrast is the whole image. High cinema glamour standing next to one of London's oldest street foods. On June 19, 1953, Michael and Robert Rosenberg read a newspaper about the last appeal in their parents' spy case. Within hours, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were gone, leaving the boys inside one of Cold War America's most painful stories. Top right does look like a German Messerschmitt Bf 109 fuselage or display piece, but the photo is too distant to confirm with full confidence. The larger aircraft in front is not German. It appears to be an American observation or liaison aircraft shown at the Minneapolis Aviation Exposition in 1944. On June 19, 1953, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg became the only American couple put to death for Cold War espionage. Their case stayed famous because it mixed secret atomic information, Soviet spying, and a courtroom story still debated decades later. On June 21, 1943, a dauntless dive bomber failed its carrier landing and ended up standing almost straight on its nose. The photo captures the strange danger of carrier aviation, where one bad landing could turn a warplane into a balancing act. In Rome in 1952, Ingrid Bergman carries her twin daughters, Isabella and Isotta Rossellini, in soft cloth baskets. One of those babies, Isabella, later became a world-famous actor and fashion icon. This rare image shows Fanny Tunison's painting of Montauk Lighthouse, made with a brush held in her mouth. Born without the use of her body below the neck, she still sold lighthouse paintings, embroidery, and handmade keepsakes from Sag Harbor. After World War II, brothers Addy and Rudolf Dassler split their shoe company and turned one family feud into two global brands. Addy created Adidas, Rudolf created Puma, and their small German town became divided by sneakers. In 1934, Lazar Kaganovich visited the exhausted crews, carving the Moscow metro under the city. The project was so tied to him that the metro carried his name for 2 decades before it was renamed. Around 1950, Wanda Lurie was photographed with her son, Mshislaw, born 15 days after she survived the Wola tragedy in Warsaw. She had lost her 3 young children before his birth, making this portrait a rare image of life continuing after the uprising. On August 22, 1916, Rotha Lintorn Orman was photographed in uniform after serving on the Serbian front. 7 years later, she founded the British Fascists, turning this calm portrait into the early face of Britain's first fascist movement. During Operation Just Cause in December 1989, United States soldiers found a Soviet-made 4-barrel anti-aircraft gun abandoned at Fort Amador. Built for air defense, it now sits silent on a street, showing how fast the base changed hands. On a New York rooftop around 1930, young dancers measured their high kicks against a giant ruler for a publicity photo. The image turns a simple dance move into a perfect symbol of the city's sky-high show business dreams. On June 17, 1885, the Statue of Liberty arrived in New York, packed into more than 300 pieces. Before becoming America's giant symbol, she was just a massive puzzle of copper, iron, and French engineering. Princess Bonnehow was a late 1800s sideshow performer whose real background was buried under showman's invented stories. Reports said she spoke several languages and wanted her earnings to help her community, making her more than the strange stage image sold to crowds. In Kent, England, in 1932, contestants in a neatest figure competition wore paper masks so judges would not see their faces. The bizarre rule turned a seaside beauty contest into a strange study of body ideals between the wars. In 1954, the United States carried out a mass removal campaign that packed many Mexican workers into guarded trucks and trains. The disturbing detail is that some people caught in the sweeps had legal papers or even United States citizenship. In 1934, France tested a motorized observation balloon that could steer itself from the rear area to a lookout point. It was built for a slow, trench-style future, but the next war moved faster than this strange flying watchtower. Downtown Las Vegas in March 1961 was still a low city, with Fremont Street cutting straight through the desert like a bright line. Before the Strip fully took over, this compact grid was the real gambling heart of Las Vegas, surrounded by open land. In 1977, former Miss Wyoming Joyce McKinney was taken by police in a case later nicknamed the Manacled Mormon. She was accused of abducting missionary Kirk Anderson, turning a beauty queen into one of the strangest tabloid stories of the decade. In Paris in 1939, Eugen Weidmann was led from prison before France's last public execution. The crowd's noisy reaction shocked officials so much that all later French executions were moved behind prison walls. In a Dutch mental hospital in 1938, this restraint chair was used on patients during severe distress or disobedience. The covered head and locked wooden box show how old psychiatric care often looked more like control than treatment. In 1937, this senior Third Reich leader stood in full uniform at the peak of his public power. By 1945, that same image of wealth and status had turned into a symbol of total collapse. In 1913, the Russian Tsar and the British King posed together looking almost like twins because their mothers were sisters. Within a few years, the First World War would turn these close royal cousins into rulers on opposite sides of a collapsing Europe. These lifeboats carried Titanic survivors toward the Carpathia on the morning of April 15, 1912. The rescue ship was 58 miles away when the call came, yet it still reached the frozen Atlantic before sunrise. A Hollywood icon applies Chanel No. 5, the perfume she made famous with one unforgettable interview answer. The photo became an official ad more than 50 years later, turning a private dressing room moment into perfume history. In 1948, Harry Truman held up a newspaper that had printed the wrong winner of the United States presidential election. The headline became legendary because Truman had already won, while the paper still claimed he had lost. In Port Tewfik, Egypt in 1926, this Indian memorial used a crouching tiger to honor soldiers from British India. The statue looked powerful for a reason. The tiger was chosen as a symbol of India, guarding the memory of its fallen men. In Montana in July 1914, a flathead farmer posed on his own land with a wide hat and a field tool. The photo is powerful because it shows native life not as a frontier myth, but as real work, land, and survival. In Cambodia around 1880, a young musician posed with a chapi, a long-necked instrument used for storytelling songs. Its huge round body and thin neck make the portrait look almost modern, like an early music album cover. On August 16, 1920, a young woman posed on a steel girder high above the city, turning construction work into a daring newspaper image. The caption joked about leaving bricklaying for ironwork, but the photo also shows how early press photographers sold danger, height, and humor in one frame. Around the early 1900s, strong woman Katie Sandwina posed beside her husband, Max Heyman, making their size difference part of the act. She became famous for lifting men above her head, and her stage name was inspired by beating Sandow in a strength challenge. On June 18, 1926, 35-year-old Dwight Eisenhower graduated first in his class at Fort Leavenworth. That quiet academic win helped launch the officer who would later command the Allied forces in Europe. During filming of Elephant Walk in Sri Lanka in 1953, Vivian Lee was photographed calmly holding a cigarette with a cobra draped around her neck. She left the production soon after, and Elizabeth Taylor replaced her, making this relaxed image feel like the last calm moment before the movie changed completely. In Haiphong on April 19, 1902, Vietnamese women hauled heavy road rollers to prepare a new road for French Governor General Paul Doumer. The image turns a colonial ceremony into something much sharper. Power arriving in comfort, while local women drag the weight of the road beneath it. On June 18, 1916, German flying ace Max Immelmann's Fokker came down near Lens after a fight high over the front. Soldiers only realized whose wreck it was when they found the Pour le Mérite medal and the initials on his shirt. Around 1947, Howard Hughes tested a radio-controlled scale model before flying his giant Spruce Goose aircraft. The model let him study the huge wooden flying boat before risking the real machine on the water. Kate McLaughlin entered a Barnardo's Children's Home in 1882 after a very hard early childhood. Her portrait shows why Victorian charity photos mattered. One small child's face became proof of a hidden world many people never saw. Anna Maeve Sullivan Waters was only 20 when she passed away after childbirth in 1853, along with her twin daughters. Her portrait feels calm, but it points to a hard truth of the 1800s. Motherhood could still be a life-changing risk. In 1954, Japan used a narrow legal reading of its pacifist constitution to create land, sea, and air self-defense forces. The wording mattered. The Constitution banned maintaining war forces, but leaders argued defense forces were something different. In South Vietnam in 1968, 12-year-old Lo Man Hung worked as one of the youngest photojournalists covering the conflict. While most children his age were in school, he stood beside tanks with a camera and turned the front line into news. At the Logan Mine in Colorado in the 1890s, owners, family members, and miners posed together at the tunnel entrance like one strange family portrait. The women sit in the ore cart while the workers hold their tools around them, showing money and hard labor in a single frame. In 1955, a famous Hollywood actor was photographed beside Edgar Degas's Little Dancer of 14 years. The sculpture moved her deeply because behind its quiet pose was the real story of a young Paris ballet student from a hard-working life. In 1955, a famous Hollywood actor was photographed beside Edgar Degas's Little Dancer of 14 years. The sculpture moved her deeply because behind its quiet pose was the real story of a young Paris ballet student from a hard-working life. In Sana'a in the middle 1900s, a Yemenite Jewish seller displayed silver jewelry, beads, bracelets, and cups on a simple street cloth. Jewish craftsmen had been famous in Yemen for metalwork for centuries, so this small market scene holds a whole lost world of skill and trade. In 1949, Pan American World Airways served full turkey dinners inside the Stratocruiser, a luxury airliner with wide seats, table service, and a lower deck lounge. At a time when flying was still rare and expensive, this meal made air travel feel less like transport and more like a private club above the clouds. In London in 1926, the Achille Serre Ladies Fire Brigade practiced hose drills in full uniforms and helmets. The company trained women for this because large laundry and cleaning works were packed with fabric, heat, and machines that needed fast emergency crews. In Germany in 1945, engineers tested a winged V-2 rocket designed to glide farther after its engine stopped. The wings were meant to greatly extend its range, but the project never became an operational system before Germany collapsed. Christina Skarbek, later known as Christine Granville, was one of Britain's first female intelligence agents in the Second World War. She skied across borders, carried secret messages through occupied Europe, and once helped free Allied agents in France using only bluff, courage, and perfect timing. This rare workshop photo shows a Soviet Ilyushin Il-2 ground attack aircraft opened up for heavy repair. Its armored body made it famous as a flying tank, but this view shows how much work it took to keep one flying. In 1970s Lviv, these Soviet hippies built their own quiet counterculture with long hair, handmade style, music, and shared ideas. In a state that pushed strict public conformity, even this relaxed group photo was a small act of personal freedom. In 1918, Italian Arditi troops tested a rare rifle-stocked Villa Perosa, turning a light aircraft weapon into something a soldier could carry. It looks strange because it came before modern compact automatic weapons had a clear shape. On January 19, 2001, the outgoing United States President sat in a half-packed Oval Office on his final day in power. The boxes behind him make the room feel less like a palace and more like a workplace being quietly handed to history. In 1972, Lam Thi Dep stood guard in the Mekong Delta of southern Vietnam, carrying a rifle beside the water. The photo is striking because women there were not just helpers. They worked as scouts, guards, and supply carriers in a river war. Around 1861, formerly enslaved people gathered at a wartime wharf after reaching Union lines during the American Civil War. These early refugee camps changed the war itself because freedom became a military question before it became national law. In Moscow in 1966, aerial gymnasts performed beneath a Soviet helicopter for the opening of the Fourth World Championship for advanced aerobatics. The image looks unreal because the show mixed circus skill, aviation pride, and Cold War spectacle in one sky-high stunt. During the First World War, an Austro-Hungarian sergeant examines a captured Italian Velar Perosa, one of the strangest early automatic weapons. It was first made for aircraft, but soldiers soon tried turning it into a compact trench weapon. In 1939, a telephone repairman sat under New York City inside a narrow tunnel packed with thousands of cables. Every call above him depended on this hidden maze, where one bad wire could silence part of the city. On June 16, 1933, Franklin Roosevelt signed the Banking Act while Americans were still rebuilding trust in their banks. The law separated risky finance from everyday deposits and created federal deposit insurance, changing how ordinary people trusted their savings. In 1965, Bernice Wyszynski answered a car ad that used bananas as slang for dollars and asked to pay with 1,395 real bananas. The story became so popular that a fruit company supplied the bananas, the dealer played along, and the bananas went to a children's hospital. A mortar crew stands with each part of the weapon carried separately, showing how one heavy system was split across several soldiers. The photo is interesting because the mortar was not one object on the march, but a backpack puzzle rebuilt before use. In the early 1970s, this Nixon campaign sign used his famous nickname for a rude political joke. It shows how American roadside politics could mix patriotism, humor, and insult in one simple billboard. On June 15, 1944, this Avenger landed on United States ship Hornet after battle damage caused its landing gear to fail. The pilot kept the aircraft on deck instead of losing it at sea, turning a broken machine into a controlled carrier landing. In late 1917, Italian artillery and supply wagons were left behind on the road to the Tagliamento River during the Caporetto retreat. The broken guns turned the road into a display of how quickly one army's front line had collapsed. On September 28, 1960, John Kennedy arrived at Niagara Falls during a campaign stop and was nearly pulled into a kiss by an excited supporter. The funniest detail is the child in the stroller below, watching the whole political circus from the front row. In 1932, Officer Herman Schlichting posed with a Thompson for a police payroll squad, protecting cash deliveries during the gangster era. The photo looks like a movie still, but it was real city work when payroll routes could attract serious crime. At the Belgian Grand Prix in 1962, racers kept speeding past while a crashed car burned beside the road. The driver escaped with only minor injuries, showing how early Formula One mixed elite skill with almost no modern safety. In 1959, two Cuban revolutionary leaders played a quick round of golf just after taking power. The strange detail is that golf had been seen as an elite sport, so this quiet game became a political image without needing a speech. A German crew rolls out a V-1 flying weapon, one of the early unmanned attack machines of the Second World War. It looked simple, but its pulse jet engine made a harsh buzzing sound that became instantly recognizable over southern England. In 1935, a Texaco station advertised regular gasoline at 16 1/2 cents per gallon, with 6 gallons for 99 cents. The sign feels unreal today, but during the Great Depression, even cheap fuel still had to fight for every customer. At 18, Elizabeth Cochran answered a sexist newspaper article so sharply that an editor hired her and renamed her Nellie Bly. She later exposed poor treatment in a New York mental hospital and circled the world in 72 days, turning outrage into a new kind of journalism. In Victorian Whitechapel, children like this were photographed to show the hidden poverty that reformers said polite London ignored. Thomas Barnardo used such images to build support for homes and schools that took thousands of children off the streets. This 1965 gym card shows Bruce Lee training with squats, presses, curls, push-ups, sit-ups, and calf raises, using simple weights and high repetition work. The striking part is how ordinary the list looks, yet it helped build the speed and control that made his body famous worldwide. On January 27, 1945, children walked out of Auschwitz after Soviet soldiers reached the camp and found thousands of prisoners still alive. Around 7,000 people remained inside, many sick and exhausted, making this one of the most important liberation images of the 20th century. In Pursglove, West Virginia, these coal miners stopped at the company store still covered in coal dust after a shift underground. The store was not just a shop, it was part of the mining system where many workers spent their pay right back to the company. Emily Dickinson spent much of her life inside her family home in Amherst, yet wrote nearly 1,800 poems that changed American literature. Her quiet rooms became a private universe of nature, time, faith, and strange, brilliant thought. This Sicilian-born performer built a long circus career around a rare twin-related condition that gave him 3 legs. He became known for charm and balance, lived to 77, and turned what crowds came to stare at into a life of fame and skill. This eerie scene comes from the 1919 British silent film The First Men in the Moon, based on a story by H.G. Wells. Its strange moon creatures were made decades before modern effects, giving early cinema one of its most alien-looking worlds. On April 27, 1865, the overcrowded steamboat Sultana broke apart on the Mississippi River while carrying many Union soldiers returning home. It became the worst maritime disaster in United States history, but was overshadowed because it happened just days after Abraham Lincoln's death. From the 1890s to the 1930s, coal miners in Appalachia fought company towns over pay, safety, and basic rights. These tracks and coal carts show the world behind the coal wars, where a mine was not just a job, but almost a whole life, controlled by one company. In 1957, rock and roll star Jerry Lee Lewis posed with Myra Gale Brown, whose young age and family tie caused a major public scandal. The news damaged his career almost overnight, turning one of music's biggest rising names into a warning story about fame and reputation. Stephen Bishop explored Mammoth Cave in 1838, crossing the bottomless pit on a cedar sapling when others would not try. Though he lived most of his life without freedom, he mapped 10 miles from memory and helped reveal the world's longest cave system. In California in 1933, Zeiss mounted a 9½ refracting telescope on a car, turning a luxury vehicle into a mobile observatory. It looks absurd today, but it let astronomers chase clearer skies before portable electronic equipment existed. In Rome in 1959, Charlton Heston and Stephen Boyd rode a Vespa between takes while filming Ben-Hur. The funny contrast is perfect. 2 actors from a massive ancient epic moving around modern Italy on a tiny scooter. In 1933, Marine General Smedley Butler said wealthy businessmen had asked him to lead veterans against Franklin Roosevelt's government. The alleged business plot is still chilling because Butler exposed it himself instead of becoming the strongman they hoped to use. During the Mexican Revolution, United States troops lined the border and sometimes crossed into Mexico after Pancho Villa's raid on Columbus in 1916. The strange twist came at Ciudad Juarez, where United States and Mexican government forces briefly fought on the same side against Villa's rebels. In January 1917, Germany secretly offered Mexico help reclaim Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico if it joined against the United States. British codebreakers exposed the Zimmermann telegram, and one sheet of numbers helped push America into the First World War. In 1950, United States Marines at Hagaru-Ri watched Corsair planes support the frozen Chosin Reservoir breakout. The smoke over the hills shows how air power became a lifeline for troops surrounded in one of the coldest battles of the Korean War. At Chosin Reservoir in 1950, a destroyed bridge blocked the only road out for United States forces retreating through the frozen mountains. Engineers reopened the escape route with bridge sections dropped from the air, turning one broken span into a fight for survival. In Bath, England, workers uncovered the Roman baths after a leak in the King's Bath led to hidden Roman tiles, lead, and pottery in 1878. By 1883, the ancient Great Bath had been cleared and opened, turning a buried Roman site into one of Britain's most famous historic places. In Salzburg, this kitchen sits inside the house where Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was born on January 27, 1756. The small room feels powerful because one of history's greatest musical minds began life not in a palace, but beside ordinary stone floors and a simple family kitchen. Marie Curie stands in her Paris laboratory beside the equipment she used to study radioactivity, work that changed physics and medicine. She became the first person to win 2 Nobel Prizes, yet this room shows how much of that history came from simple benches, wires, and relentless patience. Simo Häyhä was a Finnish marksman in the Winter War of 1939 to 1940, known for hiding in snow and using iron sights instead of a scope. His calm face became famous because he survived a severe injury and later returned to a quiet life as a farmer and hunter. On May 31, 1889, the South Fork Dam failed and sent a wall of water into Johnstown, Pennsylvania. The disaster left more than 2,000 people gone and helped make Clara Barton's American Red Cross a trusted national relief force. In 1967, Richard and Mildred Loving won the Supreme Court case that ended state bans on marriage across racial lines in America. Their quiet love story changed the law for the whole country, proving that one family could break a system built to keep people apart. In 1938, a young Orson Welles already looked like he was directing the room before Hollywood fully knew what to do with him. That same year, his radio version of The War of the Worlds made him famous nationwide and set up his leap to Citizen Kane. This racing mechanic sits inside car number 21, surrounded by bare tubes, cables, and hand-built speed. The photo is often shared as the supposed real-life inspiration for the Millennium Falcon, giving a dusty garage scene a surprising science fiction afterlife. In Nablus in 1940, workers packed blocks of olive oil soap, a craft the city had been famous for since the Ottoman era. The tall walls of soap behind him show how one simple product carried a whole local industry, family trade, and city identity. On August 1, 1914, German officers posted the mobilization order in Berlin, while boys gathered to read history before it reached them. The small crowd looks casual, but that sheet of paper marked Germany stepping into the First World War. In 1898, after the Maine disaster pushed public anger toward war with Spain, a recruiting tent appeared on a New York street for the Old Guard Regiment. The scene shows how quickly a newspaper crisis became a line of volunteers, with a city sidewalk turning into a gateway to the Spanish-American War. In Oklahoma in 1895, a traveling medicine salesman sold bottled remedies from a horse-drawn wagon to people far from city doctors. Before strong drug rules, these cure-all products mixed showmanship, hope, and business on the open road. From the 1960s to the 1980s, Soviet prison tattoos worked like a hidden biography written on skin. Each symbol could signal rank, past sentences, personal claims, or defiance, making the body itself a coded document. In 1963, a young art student posed beside his first large painting, long before his dreamlike films made him famous. The blurry houses already feel like a clue, showing the quiet suburban unease that later became his whole visual world. This famous image is from the Munich Olympics hostage crisis in September 1972, not 1971, showing a masked member of Black September inside the athletes' village. The unsettling detail is that the games were meant to show a peaceful new Germany, but one balcony scene changed Olympic history forever. In 1942, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet practiced a wartime safety drill while wearing protective masks. The photo looks strange today, but it shows how even convent life was pulled into the fear and planning of the Second World War. Write your opinion in the comments and tell us which photo you liked the most.